Oftentimes, in the communities where people of color live, what we hear about those young men and those young ladies and the citizens of communities, in communities of color, we hear a negative narrative. So what we'd like to try and do this afternoon is to give you a fuller sense of our beauty, our strength, and our courage. In order to change that narrative, it's important that we begin by acknowledging our elders and respecting their courage and respecting that they are the foundations on which we stand. We'd like to make these moments as precious as we can possibly make them. And in order to make them precious, we need to hear their voices. I'd like to begin by asking each of you just to share something of yourself, a biography of yourself, if you will. Ms. Barnett, can you tell us about yourself, please?
I'm happy to say I was born here in Harlem, New York, USA, Harlem Hospital, and was a resident of Harlem most of my life, until I moved to the Bronx in the 70s or something like that. And I went to high school, junior high school here in the Bronx, so Wadley High School, which is now, it was an all-girls school when I went there. It's now an integrated school, and it remains a very prestigious high school in the community, and it's people like Mr. McIntosh keeping it alive and keeping the current students worthy of mention, and that they are, and we have contributed many things to the school. We go there and find, even have a piano that we donated to the school, baby grand piano, which is used up to today. And we recently sort of unable to continue because people have moved, died, etc. But it's still one of the, and people like Mr. McIntosh, who have kept in touch with us all through the years, recognize us as one of the family of Wadley, and we've interacted with him and are still interacting with him. And the ladies that you see here today are some of our original members who we all stick together and giving back to the school in many ways. And we hope and pray that she'll never die.
Do you feel that anything has changed from the time that you came to New York, and you said that you lived in Harlem? Do you feel good about what you see happening now?
Personally, I always feel proud when I come to Harlem because this is my birthplace, and this is where we got our education. Some of us were fortunate enough to go on to college, and I feel that people like you who are still struggling to keep some of these things alive, so to speak. But the main thing is to keep community informed of this school in the neighborhood, particularly now that you're getting white students coming. I mean, let's face it, they're going to be soon taking over Harlem, and their children are going to school there because I've been knowing that, but a couple months ago I met some family of mine in Morris Park. We were having a just a little get together, and they knew about Wadley and the history of Wadley and whatever. And they said, "What's with Wadley?" I said, "Well, she's still here. The white folks haven't taken that from us yet." I said, "They're coming back and whatever." But I think I see that has to be, whatever happens, that part of history has to be preserved in stone or in publications once in a while, or publicity in Amsterdam or something like that. Let them know that even though we might not be organization goals are still being met by some of the things that are going on.
What would you say to a young person, Ms. Barnett? I know that you have to leave, and that's why I'm directing most of these questions at you right now. But what would you say to a young person, given your experience and the time that you've been on this earth, and you've seen the struggle? You've been around when people like Martin Luther King were being oppressed, and the struggle that he was trying to lead, that effort, that movement was being oppressed. When Adam Clayton Powell lived in Harlem, you've lived through much of that. If a young person, if you had the chance to say to a young person, give them some advice, what would you say to them, knowing how we've struggled just to kind of exist and continue to be?
I would try to let them know, I mean, they should learn and be aware of the history of the school and whatever, and some of the goals that were were set forth earlier, the Arista programs, and people went on to college. More space, especially pointing in the direction of City College, to get to further their education, in other words, not just leave it end at one.
So if I understand you correctly, your advice to a young person would be that it should be a priority to try and get as much education as possible. So I realize that you have to leave, Ms. Burnett, and I thank you for taking the time to be here this afternoon, and we're going to at some point continue this conversation.
Right.
I was born in Harlem Hospital. I've always lived in Manhattan, never the Bronx, not one day. Brooklyn, Queens, I don't know anything about those places. So when we went to junior high school, 136th Street in St. Nicholas Avenue. That's the building still there. They've changed the name so many times. Went there. And then from there, graduated there, went on to Wale, took an academic course. So right away, you couldn't get a job for the application. I know they must put them in the garbage, right? So then I worked in factories. And then finally, during the war, I worked temporarily in the post office. And, excuse me, after high school, then I got married. Miss Walker here. She's my husband's cousin. Yeah. So then we had a little girl, 3 years old. So she got killed accidentally by a car. So I never had any more children. So I have several nieces and nephews.
What were some of the problems or some of the concerns that you had? Do you think that we have progressed? Do you consider the problems that still confront us something that we're responsible for? Or do you think there are still forces or people who still do not accept us for who we are?
Well, it looks like some of them don't accept us for who we are. All you hear is knifing and gunning. I never heard it when we grew up. Right. People used to fist fight, right?
Right.
But stabbing and gunplay, no, indeed, I don't understand it at all.
So that's one of the reasons why it's so important to celebrate you and Ms. Rodriguez and of course Ms. Barnett and Ms. Walker, the things that you all have tried to do in supporting young people. I'm going to ask you the same question before I come to Ms. Rodriguez. I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Ms. Burnett. Oftentimes, negative behavior, we're hurting each other, we're shooting each other. Why do you think that is?
I think they need a little more education. And do they go to church? See, we went to church, we went to Sunday school, and there you learn quite a bit. And do they have very many Boy Scouts these days?
Those organizations still exist.
They used to have a lot of Boy Scouts, right?
So if I understand you correctly, one of the things you think is missing is that we don't go to church the way that we used to. Oftentimes, our families are not as religious as they once were.
No.
And also, you mentioned the fact that education may be one of the concerns that we have. We're not putting the kind of, some of us I should say, we're not putting the kind of value on education that needs to be placed there. So we're going to come back to you in just a few minutes, but we'd like to move on and speak to Ms. Rodriguez for just a minute. Of course, we'd like you just to kind of share something of yourself, and I think you get a sense of the kinds of concerns and questions I have with regards to what you all have done in trying to help young people. So could we begin with just some information about who you are?
I had two older sisters, both born at Harlem Hospital. And I was born at home, and there was quite no reason, I guess. My mother had a midwife, but not, what do you call it? And I was born at home. And it was 3 girls. I had 2 sisters. All of us finished high school. My older sister, my mother had said, oh, well, she had heard there was an academic high school in Harlem. That was the only one at that time. And she said, oh, no, she's going to George Washington, because that was academic. And in those days, you had to live in the area to go to GW. So she had the address changed so my older sister could go there. But that didn't work out, because my older sister said, oh, those children at lunchtime, it was terrible. So the next 2 was my middle sister and me. We both went to Wadley, because it was an academic high school. And my middle sister knew she wanted to go into nursing, and she wanted to get that education, that basic education, always in the rapid advancement they had at that time. When I came along, I was 4 years younger than her. Of course, I went to Wadley, which was fine, and I did very well at Wadley, and they had all through the junior high school years, I was in, they used to call it RA and RB, Rapid Advancement, which I'd had. Then I went into Wadley, and when I got into I didn't live near Wadley. I lived 147th and 7th, so it was quite a trip to get all the way down, but that was the only academic high school at that time. And I went into Wadley, doing well, and when I got into the, I think it was the 8th term, what is it, nine terms in Wadley? 4 years in Wadley, yeah. In 1 year, I made the honor roll in Wadley, and I took the academic course, and I did fine. I had no problem. I had no problem there at Wadley. Although my mother told me, you all are going to get a high school diploma, no dropping out of school. So we all went through our high school years. And the sister closest to me became a RN and went to the Harlem School of Nursing. And my mother wanted me to become a nurse. That was not my, and so my mother said, well, what do you want to do? She was very upset. I said, I want to be a secretary, because to me that was a big deal, to learn shorthand, which I didn't learn. I didn't know anything about shorthand at Wadley, taking an academic course. So when I finished Wadley, I went to a private secretarial school, which was expensive for my mother at the time, but she wanted to give me what I wanted to do. And it cost her $100 to pay for me to go to the secretarial school, which I did. And I was very happy there, and I've done that kind of work my whole years after I had my son and in the government. And my last position when I retired was principal administrative associate, they called it at that time, to the general counsel of the agency. And that was my background in working. And I retired from that position.
If I hear you correctly, you seem to be echoing what Ms. Barnett and what Ms. Raj have mentioned when they talk about the value and importance of education.
Oh, yes,
You
yes.
know,
Oh, she was on us about that. Yes. My father had passed away when I was 12.
Okay.
So it was my mother doing all that supervising. You're getting a high school diploma, no dropping out of school.
But I never heard of people dropping out when we were
But they
young.
used to drop out. My
Yeah.
neighbor, she never
I
finished
never-
high school. But the thing is, in those days, you could always get a job without a high school diploma. She worked for General Electric without a high school diploma. But my mother knew that academic diploma was important. And she was not an educated woman.
See, one of the things that's important about this conversation is that each of you have mentioned the importance of getting an education.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that I can, well, unfortunately, is a problem with many of our young people today. And not all of it is of their doing.
The parents.
Precisely. And also some economic issues impact negatively on our communities.
Excuse me, may I ask you, when did these GED diplomas come up?
The
We
GED,
never heard of
the
it.
general education diplomas.
yeah.
They drop out and
Yeah.
then they go back.
Right, I think it was the late 60s, and
Oh, yeah.
those diplomas were
I never
intended,
had heard of it.
well, they were intended to try and get a high school diploma for those young people who did not or could not graduate for whatever reasons.
Academically, oh, my mother was not educated,
Oh,
but
my
she
mother-
knew the academic diploma was the top diploma you should graduate with, and I took the 2 languages, and, everything pertaining to coming out of high school with an academic diploma.
But there have been some individuals who have gotten GEDs and have gone on to do quite well.
Yeah,
So if one has the desire and if one understands the importance of getting a good education, and if it's handled properly, and if you study and apply yourself, there's no reason that a person who perhaps may not be quite as qualified, through no fault of their own, they cannot go on to achieve their dreams. But I appreciate the fact that we have a common understanding of the importance of trying to get an education. And we're going to come back to you all in just a minute, but we'd like to move on to Ms. Walker for just a second. Would you please, if you will, just share something of yourself with us and the importance of, if you want to comment on education or whatever those concerns are that you think might help to encourage and inspire our young people.
Well, my name is Dolores. Well, I was trying to say my maiden name. It's so long.
so long ago.
Dolores Johnson. And I went to Catholic school, St. Charles, on 142nd Street, between 7th and 8th Avenues. And we had small classes, and the thing about it was when I started to go, there was more whites in the classroom than blacks. And when I graduated, it was more blacks than whites. And we all had the same education. We stayed in the same classes. And when we graduated, we all went to different schools because you had to take a test before you got in. And I went to Wardley High. They sent me there. And in the meantime, the area was changing with the whites moving out and the blacks moving in to go to high school. And they all stressed to take different subjects so that you would have a rounded education. Let me see. My course was commercial, and well, we stayed there. We had like 2 years of high school, what is it, accounting courses. And when we graduated, that's when you moved on to go to a private school to further your education.
I think it's important for us to know our history. We have to know where we came from. If we don't know that, we can't progress, we can't achieve. And when I look at the three of you, and Miss Burnett, when I look at you, from my perspective, I understand that I am here because there were people like you who struggled, who fought and struggled and died. And that's why I feel humble. I feel that without you, there would be no me. And I appreciate the fact that you've allowed me to sit here and have this conversation with you. I really do. But you know, just continuing with what I was thinking when I look at you and when I think about the struggle that we've had as a people, I remember there was a lady by the name of Osceola McCarty. She was a washerwoman from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. She had to drop out of school in the 6th grade. But this washerwoman who worked washing clothes for these white people in Mississippi all of her life, she managed to save almost $150,000 by the time she was an older woman. And you know what she decided to do with that money? She decided that she was going to give that money to the University of Mississippi so that black kids who were poor would have a chance to get an education. It just so happens that President Clinton gave her a medal for what she tried to do. You had the United Nations, you had even Harvard University honored her for her generosity. And I bring her up because she unselfishly gave of herself to help students who needed help. And that's the same thing that you all have done. Those scholarships that you all were giving out each year, those scholarships helped young people to go out to school. And that's important. And I bring that up again because this moment is really about you all. It's about Ms. Raj, Ms. Rodriguez, Ms. Walker, Ms. Burnett. I just happened to be here because I wanted to say thank you. And in saying thank you, I'm hoping that whomever comes to understand the struggle and what it takes to preserve who we are as a people, in spite of the racism, in spite of the oppression, in spite of all of that, without you all, we wouldn't be here. And so forgive me for being a part of this conversation. I really wanted just to have you all to talk. So if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you another question, unless you'd like to continue just sharing something of yourself with those that will see this. Ms. Raj, if you choose to Um, I know that you have some concerns. When you came to see me last time at Wadley, and I felt really bad when you mentioned to me that you all had struggled, this group had struggled to be a contributor and to support those students. And unfortunately, just a basic courtesy of saying thank you really wasn't extended. I mean, I don't know if that's the fault of those recipients, if it's a fault of the times, but it seems to me that there was a sense of appreciation, there was a sense of duty, and a sense of respect that somehow is not present today. And it's not necessarily the fault of those young people. Maybe they're not being taught. But how do you feel about that? Do you have any comments about that, Ms. Radge or Ms. Rodriguez or Ms. Walker?
I think what is it? Your parents had to go out and work, and they didn't tell you to study no book or tell you had to get on, but it was something in all of us that did the hard part by just going to school and trying to learn and make something of yourself, because nobody wanted to go on the red line. Our parents weren't rich, but they went out there and found some kind of work to do each day. Well, my parents, they didn't have the best of jobs, and so they did what they could. And nobody had a round table at dinner time to sit and say, well, what did you do today? And to tell how they got off, how they managed in school, what grade you brought home, because they were so tired, they had to get their rest too. So it was in your mind, and looking and going to the movies and seeing how the white people conducted themselves, and what they always talked about education. And for us, the ones that could do it, they went on out and learned and kept going until it was time for them to graduate and get a job.
If we didn't come home with 100% in the spelling growing up, why didn't you get 100? So we had to, she pressured us a lot. And so you wanted to do well. And math was my worst subject, but particularly geometry. I'll never forget that. But I made the Wadley. I was at the special grade. My last year, they had a class of special graders, and I made that special grade class when I was in my last year at Boston. I remember that, because I made over 80% in everything. Yeah,
All I know is that I knew I wanted to be a nurse,
And what happened?
I got the application, and like you said, your mother, $100, that was like $1,000, she couldn't afford it.
No, my sister went to Harlem School of Nursing.
I was the older one, and she just couldn't afford it.
I don't remember.
But that's what I wanted
My
to be.
sister was 4 years older than I am. But I know she went to Harlem School of Nursing. From Wadley, she went to Wadley too.
I just have to say, if it hasn't been said to you before, that there are people who understand who you are and who love you for your example. And I think if we are going to continue to progress and make something of our lives and capture the essence and spirit and beauty and courage of our people, we have to look at you all. And so I thank you. I don't quite know if I've created an environment for you all to feel comfortable in talking, but the only thing that we can do is to come from our hearts. So thank you.